To discuss this further, our guest on this story is Christopher Morris, teaching fellow at the University of Portsmouth. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us on France 24 today. Professor, are you there?
Loud and clear, thank you.
All right, excellent. So tell us, we're talking about these possible humanitarian pauses, even though we haven't really heard about when it's going to take place. This first one, this Friday, and we're well past noon in Israel. So this and the language behind the calling for these pauses. I mean, who is calling the shots in this war? Who is the one deciding what's happening, why it's happening, what the end goal is? A big question, I know, but specifically, let's start with these humanitarian pauses. What is the role, for example, of Washington?
Washington is certainly playing a significant role behind these humanitarian pauses. Now, Israel remains resolute in its core mission of destroying Hamas, and it's understandably reluctant to effectively make any concessions on the basis of humanitarian need or anything that I suppose could be leveraged by Hamas in terms of a ceasefire. Now, it's undoubtedly the case that Washington is bringing some moderate pressure to bear on Israel, and this is hugely significant. Not only is it going to help salvage both the US's and Israel's reputation in the long term, but also it's going to have a humanitarian effect on hopefully allowing some civilians to evacuate the areas.
I mean, you're talking about the immediate term, right? When you're talking about the civilians, you're talking about the humanitarian. I guess I'm also asking about the bigger picture, the longer term. The United States has been a very big partner of the region, especially I'm talking about Israel-Palestine, hosting summits, the Oslo Accords, Camp David. I mean, these are all kind of initiatives of the United States over the decades, really. Does the United States still have that clout in this conflict?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to say at this current juncture. Of course, the US's major interest in the region is going to be regional stability. It does, however, have this, I suppose, long-standing and deep relationship with the Israeli state. Now, in the minds of many, particularly across the region, that somewhat compromises their role as a regional power and a regional peacemaker. Now, as to whether or not the US still has the clout it needs in the region, of course, that is increasingly doubtful. It is facing increasing competition from the likes of Russia and China within the region. And this idea, this era of US stability, again, it's being increasingly called into question. I mean, very recently, we've seen in the wake of the Hamas-Israel conflict, we've seen strikes against US forces in the region. Now, of course, one of their major interests is going to be securing their own force protection and maintaining the persistence, maintaining the viability of their long-term presence in the region.
But do the US and Israel, do they have the same objectives when it comes to the Near East?
Doubtful at this juncture. Now, whilst, again, both of them have been persistent in terms of, we want a stable region within this area of the world. I would say that the Hamas-Gaza war, the Hamas-Israel war at the moment, we are seeing a divergence somewhat emerge. Now, many people are framing Israel's efforts as kind of retribution at the moment, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out when we juxtapose it with the wider US goal of stability. Now, we could see some divergence there. Now, in the short to medium term, we're definitely going to see the tacit support of the US for Israel play out in this conflict. We're talking about the continued provision of arms, continued support at the UN. These are certainly going to be important factors. Now, it remains undoubtable that the US and Israel are going to remain staunch allies. I will, however, stress that increasingly what we're probably going to see is the US trying to exert its incredible influence over Israel in the interests of wider stability. And we're seeing that kind of bear fruit in these latest humanitarian pauses. What that looks like into the long term, I'm at this juncture unsure, but hopefully someone is going to be holding the leash.
Humanitarian pauses that have been announced, but that we still haven't seen this Friday, at least not so far. Thank you so much for joining us on France 24 and answering our questions. Christopher Morris, teaching fellow at the University of Portsmouth. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, ballistic missiles that were fired at Eilat on the Red Sea on Thursday were claimed by Yemen's Houthi rebels. It was one of the at least 5 aerial attacks the group has launched against southern Israel since October 7th. Jean-Emile Jamin reports.
As the war in Gaza nears its 6th week, Israel is facing attacks across several fronts. Militants battling from the enclave, and to the north, Hezbollah. From the south, Houthi rebels have persistently launched missile and drone attacks since October 7th. But they've all either fallen short or been shot down by Israeli forces. The Yemeni-based group declared another assault on Thursday, aimed at a resort town on Israel's southern border.
Our military forces have fired a batch of ballistic missiles at different sensitive Israeli targets south of the occupied lands, including military targets in al-Rashrash, Eilat. And with God's help, the operation achieved its objective successfully and led to direct casualties despite the enemy's discretion about it.
Earlier in the day, people were seen scrambling across Eilat as air sirens blared throughout the Red Sea port city.
Today, an unmanned aerial vehicle hit a residential building in the city of Eilat. There are no casualties. We are investigating that incident. Another air alert was activated as one of our aero missiles intercepted a threat outside our airspace, far from Eilat, coming towards Israel. We intercepted a surface-to-surface missile launched in our direction.
Despite the opaque information, the Houthis have recently taken on a more active role in the broader regional conflict. On Wednesday, the United States confirmed one of its drones was shot down off the coast of Yemen, an act the Houthi rebels claimed as their own in a video release. The Iran-backed group, which control Yemen's capital Sana'a, have vowed to continue their military operations in support of Palestinians, doing so until Israel's bombardment stops against Hamas.